We've been looking at the music of Bruce Springsteen through the decades. We've looked at what he did in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s. Quite a bit of work and an amazing talent on display. But now in this episode, we're going to turn our attention to the music that Bruce puts out in the decade starting with the year 2000. And there's quite a bit. So are you ready? Well then, let's drop the needle. To start this decade, Bruce decides that he wants to record a studio album with the E Street Band. Now, this will be their first studio album in 18 years. And he works on it for quite a while. But of course, then something traumatic happens. Yeah, we're talking about 9/11. And Bruce, like everybody else, is affected by those attacks on the World Trade Center. So the album takes on a new turn. He calls the album The Rising, and it comes out in 2002. Most of the songs on this album reflect Bruce's thoughts about that horrific event. I particularly like Lonesome Day, Waiting on a Sunny Day, Mary's Place, The Rising, and My City of Ruins. It's a great album, and it came out just when everybody needed to have their spirits lifted, and it got to #1 in the UK and the US. But Bruce is a restless artist, and he decides that he really likes to change things up. So his next album is going to be an acoustic album, a solo one again. It'll be his third acoustic album, and it's called Devils and Dust. It's released in 2005. I like the title song, Devils and Dust, Long Time Comin', Jesus Was an Only Son, The Hitter, and All I'm Thinking About. Following The Rising, Devils and Dust also hits #1, both in the UK and the US. Bruce says he's always admired the music of Americana, but never really dug into it until 1977, when he was asked to be part of a tribute album on the music of Pete Seeger, and the album was called Where Have All the Flowers Gone? Bruce's song was We Shall Overcome. Now, Bruce has said he really didn't know much about Pete Seeger's music when he cut that song, but it intrigued him, so he decided to dig deeper, and this became the inspiration for his next album, which is called We Shall Overcome. It's his first album that doesn't contain any Springsteen-written material. On vinyl, it's a double album containing 13 cuts. The musicians on this album became known as the Session Band, and Bruce took them out on a tour billed as Bruce Springsteen with the Seeger Sessions Band. The album was well received, and Pete Seeger even said he liked it. It did well on sales. It hit #3 in the UK and in the US. For his next album, Bruce goes back into the vaults and discovers a recording in 1975 that he and the E Street Band did in London at the Hammersmith Odeon. Now, there's an interesting backstory about this concert. There was so much publicity around Born to Run, you remember, and there was a media backlash about all that publicity, and Bruce was very sensitive to it. Well, when he and the band arrived at the Hammersmith Odeon, he saw these huge banners that were posted up that said, London is finally ready for Bruce Springsteen and the E Street Band, and Bruce was so incensed that he pulled them all down before the concert. Nonetheless, the concert was a huge success, and he did 3 encores. Over 30 years later, in 2006, this incredible concert is released on an album called Hammersmith Odeon, London, 1975. And the album hits 33 in the UK and 93 in the US. Then a year later, in 2007, he releases another live album, and this is called Live in Dublin. Now, on this album, he does not have the E Street Band with him. He has the Sessions Band, and they actually cover classic Bruce Springsteen songs along with those Pete Seeger songs. It reaches 21 in the UK and 23 in the US. For his next album, which will be his 15th album, he decides again to record in the studio with the E Street Band, marking their first time they've recorded in the studio in 5 years. And the album is called Magic. It's quite dark, and it's a reflection of Bruce's disillusionment with the American society. I like Radio Nowhere, You'll Be Coming Down, Gypsy Biker, Girls in Their Summer Clothes, which is kind of really the only upbeat one, Magic, and Long Walk Home. critics liked the album, but it really didn't get much airplay. But it sold well. It topped the charts in both the US and the UK. To support the album, Bruce decides there'll be a Magic tour, and it's his first tour with the E Street Band in 5 years. Unfortunately, it is the last tour that longtime member Danny Federici appears on, as he died in 2008. That same year in 2008, Bruce really supported Barack Obama's run for the presidency. And in fact, he went out and appeared at many of the political rallies to support him, playing just acoustic songs and being a solo act with Barack. And in fact, when Barack won the presidency, the very first song played at his victory speech in Chicago was The Rising. And then in D.C., at the inaugural celebration, which was held at the Lincoln Memorial, Bruce appeared there to over 400,000 fans. Then to start 2009, Bruce decides that they'll record an album while they're still out on the Magic tour, and the album is called Working on a Dream. Bruce wanted to capture the energy from the tour. The album is dedicated to Danny Federici, as it contains some of the last songs that he played on. I like My Lucky Day, of course the great Working on a Dream, and Queen of the Supermarket. The album tops the charts both in the US and the UK, and of course there's a Working on a Dream tour. In February of 2009, Bruce and the E Street Band perform at the halftime performance at the Super Bowl. And Bruce, in a press conference, said this would be a 12-minute party. Well, he was close. The set actually was 13 minutes, and it was an amazing set. It included versions of 10th Avenue Freeze Out, Born to Run, Working on a Dream, and Glory Days. And it included a great scene where Bruce runs, drops to his knees, and slides right at the TV camera. Amazing performance. So in this decade of 2000, Bruce releases The Rising, Devils and Dust, We Shall Overcome, Hammersmith Odeon 1975, Live in Dublin, Magic, Working on a Dream. So in total, 7 albums from Bruce in this decade. Now, as usual, I've created a Spotify playlist where you can listen to some of the songs that I've talked about in this episode. And here's the link, and I'll also put it in the comments below. So let's recap. Here's Bruce's albums that he put out in the 70s, and then in the 80s, and in the 90s, and now in the decade of the 2000s. But we got more to go. In the next episode, we'll look at what he does in the decade that starts 2010. Thanks for the music, Bruce, and thank you for watching, and keep a rockin'. If you liked this episode, hit the like button, and you can also leave me a comment down below, and I'll respond to you. If you subscribe, we'll let you know when future episodes come out.